Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Wednesday, which does mean I'm a little bit late getting to this, was very busy yesterday and didn't have time to make this video, but we are here. The patch notes for 9.14 have been posted, and that means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 9.14 is positively massive. There are a ton of changes at both competitive powerhouses and casual players alike, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it because otherwise this is already going to be a very long video, so let's go ahead and take a look. First and foremost, Riot are adding counter mechanics to a couple of champions' existing abilities in order to broaden the champion pool, especially when opponents are stacking particular strategies such as shield stacking, healing stacking, or lots of mobility. So these champions are all receiving small tweaks in order to hopefully give them a niche when opponents are trying to play these comps. Blitzcrank and Renekton both receive some anti-shielding abilities. Blitz's R and Renekton's Empower W now remove damage shields on enemies they strike before their existing effects apply, so they're really good in compositions that try to just shield the hell out of the AD carry. Katarina and Kled now have healing reduction mechanics. Katarina already had Grievous Wounds, but now it's 60% healing reduction, and Kled also has 60% healing reduction on targets he pulls. So if the enemy team is running something like a Vladimir with a Soraka and a Mundo or something, these champions are much better picks against those particular compositions. Fizz and Leona have some better damage reduction in order to make them a little bit better against damage over time champions like Brand or Cassiopeia, so that way they can kind of survive lanes a little bit. So these are good picks if you know you're going to be against those types of champions in lane. Karma, LeBlanc, and Morgana all got additional True Sight components, so through the root on their chain abilities, you will still be able to see stealth enemy champions. So before, you could only see them during the tether, and then once the root actually went through, they'd go back into stealth. No longer the case. You will always be able to see them throughout the duration of the stun, so again, dealing with stealth champions and stealth compositions. And Ahri and Cassiopeia now have some anti-mobility spells. Oh, Poppy as well, I did forget about her. But they have some anti-mobility spells as well. Ahri's E re-stops enemies in the middle of dashes. Cassiopeia's W now can be cast at any range. She also got a small tweak to her E again because Riot are still saying, we want you to max E first. It's supposed to be less of a one-point wonder than that, so Cassiopeia has a few tweaks in order to make E max a little bit more enticing, but the biggest thing is the W change. And Poppy, if she blocks an enemy dash with her W, the enemy is now grounded and slowed for a brief period of time. So again, these are all mechanics designed to sort of broaden the champion pool and say, hey, the enemy team has a lot of mobility, I can pick somebody like Poppy or Cassiopeia, or hey, the enemy team has a lot of healing, I can pick somebody like Kled. That's the intent of these changes. I think for the most part, they're not going to do that much because the champions that receive them generally weren't very playable in the first place. I think the biggest ones are the Poppy and the Cassiopeia. I really do think Poppy is going to start seeing a lot of play given how good W is at stuffing champions with lots of mobility, especially someone like Callista, who now can't even dash at all if she gets blocked once by Poppy. That's really strong. Poppy's also going to be quite good against Riven, for example, who can't use her Q or her E if she gets blocked once by the Steadfast Presence. So I think these are pretty important changes. I don't know how big they're going to be in general, but I do think it's an interesting approach from Riot, and I'm honestly looking forward to seeing if they do any more of these changes in the future. Moving right along to champion balance, we do need to talk about Aatrox real quick. I already did a video about this earlier, so you can go watch that for the full breakdown, but generally, Aatrox is going to be losing his ability to revive, period. He is always killable. He has no way of getting back up afterwards unless he's built a Guardian Angel or has a Zillion or something. Now, he did get some small compensation buffs. His ultimate's cooldown has been reduced by 20 seconds at all ranks, and he has better self-healing during his ultimate. But he does not have the ability to revive, and that alone, I think, is just going to drop Aatrox out of professional play. He's not a safe blind pick anymore. You don't have that sort of guaranteed, all right, he can revive, he can't just kind of snowball the fight. I think it's a lot easier to deal with him at this point. So, and especially with the other champions receiving the balance changes on this patch, especially the Grievous Wounds application, I don't think Aatrox is going to be quite that good, especially not if he gets pulled by a Kled and suffers 60% reduced healing. That's going to really tank Aatrox. Akali's getting some small changes along the way. Riot are trying to make her less frustrating to play against by removing the obscurity on her W. It's now just regular plain old invisibility, which does still mean that you can't see her short of towers being able to reveal her, or if you had something like a True Sight tether on her beforehand. But it also means that she can't just press W underneath your tower and constantly drop tower aggro by going back into obscurity, popping out, hitting you a couple times, going back into obscurity, that sort of thing. That did leave Riot with room to buffer, though. She got some small buffs to the ratios on her 5-point strike and Shuriken Flip. Shuriken Flip also got additional base damage. Oh no, sorry. The base damage did go down, but the ratios went up. So Akali will feel a little bit better about the damage she gets from items. In general, I hope this is enough to make Akali feel a little less frustrating to play against. I never had a problem with her personally, but I know a lot of people hated that champion to death, so hopefully this goes a long way towards making her feel a little bit better to play against. Her R also received a small bump to its cooldown because Riot want to incentivize her. They want to punish her more if she uses it to escape rather than to try and actually kill somebody. Moving right along, Galio is receiving a pretty massive change on this patch because of how good Flash Taunt was, which feels really bad if you played the old Galio and he was only good for Flash Taunt, and now new Galio is only good for Flash Taunt. So the changes here are basically, I'm not a big fan of how Riot did this, but I have to acknowledge that this probably will have the intended effect of removing Galio from professional play entirely. So Galio now can't flash while channeling his W, and his W can be interrupted by all the usual crowd control effects that affect channels. Now, the self-slow is down to 15%, so he'll be a little bit quicker. He'll be able to move into position for the W faster. But given that it's interruptible, given that he can't flash, Galio is actually just a dead-in-the-water champion because that crowd control effect is never going to go off, ever. There is no possible way for Galio to use that to set up any plays at all. It's still a good defensive tool, don't get me wrong, but it also means that the playmaking potential of Galio is slim to none now because one stray crowd control ability and he loses a very, very powerful part of his kit. So disappointed to see that Riot basically, I think all you needed to do is give him the interrupt on it and still let him flash, but then maybe he's still too good, but you could see it coming. I don't know. I think it's too far. I do think some of these changes will be reverted because I think this just kills Galio. Now, Riot did have room to buff some of the other aspects of his kit. He did get a little bit better damage on his Q and the mana cost went down, and his passive was also minorly reworked. It's a lower cooldown overall, but doesn't have the reset mechanic, but it also deals significantly more damage at almost all levels. So ideally, this should make Galio feel a little bit more damagey, a little bit more fun to play, but losing that playmaking potential on the W is a huge deal, and he's definitely not going to see any pro play from here on out. I can tell you that much right now. Lux is getting some changes as well. Obviously, we all are familiar with Aftershock Lux and how completely ridiculous her W shield is and how much shielding you get from that. So Riot are changing that down. Prismatic Barrier does not double the outgoing shield. It can still stack with itself, but it doesn't get you to some truly obscene amounts of shields. The shielding ratio also did go up, but the maximum shield went down. So it means it'll be easier for her to hit maximum shield, but it also means that it isn't going to be for nearly as much as it used to be. The shield doesn't last as long either, so this is really taking out a lot of power from her W and shifting it back towards more AP mid lane centric Lux builds. In addition, her R was changed. It had the partial reset mechanic on it thing, but really weird mechanic, and it wasn't exactly doing what Riot wanted it to do. So they basically are giving you the same degree of success just by tweaking the cooldown. So the cooldown's down by 10 seconds, and the AP ratio is back up. Essentially, with 45% CDR, it's still an incredibly short cooldown Final Spark. You can pretty much fire it off cooldown and not worry about it at all, and it'll do significantly more damage at 1.0 AP ratio. She also got some small compensation buffs to the light binding cooldown. It looks like they want to make this a first max because it does have the cooldown scaling down with rank. I think you still do E, obviously, for mid lane Lux, but support Lux will probably want to consider doing light binding as a first max as opposed to prismatic barrier, given how bad that is now. So hopefully this nerfs Aftershock Lux in a meaningful way, but we'll have to wait and see. It might still be too good and continue to see play. Moving on to Malphite, who has some really big changes on this patch. Riot are doing a minor upgrade, tweak, pass on Malphite to make him both feel like he's a little bit better to play, that he has more decision making, and also really make him feel like the colossal mountain champion he's supposed to be. First and foremost, he did get new VFX for all his abilities and skins. He also now increases in size based on his maximum armor, which is really, really cool. And I too quite like that because you can finally feel like the mountain he's always supposed to be. His Q, for the most part, I can kind of parse this for you guys. It'll feel more responsive. It casts further out from his arm, so it'll take less travel time to actually reach the enemy champions. So hopefully that makes it feel more responsive. He also steals, I believe the movement speed it steals is based on either a flat amount or the movement that he's actually stolen from them, whichever is higher. So he should get more movement speed from this in general. The slow is increased and the slow duration has been reduced though, so in general, that should feel a little bit better. His W is now an auto attack reset when he first casts it. He deals bonus damage, he gets increased range, and it does damage in a cone. And then afterwards, for the next 5 seconds, he gets damage in a cone on his auto attacks instead of the circle that we're used to. So hopefully this makes Malphite feel a little bit better to play as, gives him a little bit more decision making as opposed to, yeah, just press W off cooldown. He did keep the triple armor on his W as long as his Granite Shield holds. So that was a change that was initially going to be removed, and then they put it back on the kit. So hopefully this makes Malphite feel a little bit better to play. It was a big change. I don't think it'll improve his viability at all, but it'll make him feel a little bit better. Mordekaiser is getting nerfed on this patch even more. He's still too strong accordingly, so he will be receiving some nerfs. His passive's damage is going down significantly. The late game scaling is basically not there anymore, so really gonna be hurting even if he gets Darkness Rise off. And he's losing some of the free magic penetration he gained as a result of his E. Now, he did sort of need that magic penetration in order to do as much damage as he did. Similarly to Darius, who has the armor penetration on his E, and he kind of ended up needing that. I do think that Mordekaiser probably needed that, and I think that the reduction to the damage that his passive does is potentially too high. That's one of the parts that Mordekaiser really was supposed to be rewarded for if he got his passive off, but maybe I've never considered Mordekaiser to be that strong following his rework, so what do I know? He probably does need these nerfs. Moving on. Pyke has got some small quality of life buffs. Riot's basically removal of solo lane Pyke has really given them some room to buff this guy back up, so they are doing some changes. Phantom Undertow now stuns non-champions. It just doesn't do any damage to them, so hopefully that helps a little bit with Pyke's ability to control waves, especially the solo lane. And his ultimate has been refactored a little bit. Now, it does deal 50% reduced damage to enemies that survive it, so if you are just casting it for free damage, they won't take as much as they did previously. But Pyke and the last assisting ally both get a cut. And if Pyke assists on a kill following death from below, he gets 2 cuts. So Pyke is really going to have some gold generation going on if he's able to get these cuts going. So hopefully it makes him feel a little bit better to play now that he's really, really been nerfed. Swain is also getting a minor rework on this patch. Riot are trying to remove the soul fragment gameplay because that was such a weird mechanic and no one really knew why it existed. So Riot are trying to make it so that his ultimate is always available and give him a different way to use the soul fragment mechanic in stealing pieces of enemies' souls. So now he permanently stores soul fragments, which increases his maximum health by 5 per soul fragment, and collecting a soul fragment restores up to 7% of his mana. So this is now sort of a sustain mechanic. He gets a little bit of HP back, he still heals himself, and he gets some mana back every time he pulls out a soul. So you're heavily incentivized to try and fish for souls as much as possible in lane, rather than just try to lane it out. His Q, the bolts always continue through minions, but they stop on impact with champions. The cooldown was pretty decently increased, so Swain will want to start building a little bit more CDR than he did before, and the range was nerfed a little bit, but it does give him a decent amount of wave clear, especially if he can get to the side of a wave and really just blast all the minions. So I do kind of like that change. I'll have to see how it works out. And finally, his R is now a proper ultimate. It does cost mana, and he gets significantly less bonus health, but the bonus health he gets scales with his soul fragment. So on top of the 5 HP he's getting permanently from collecting soul fragments, he's getting another 5 when he casts another 5 per soul fragment whenever he casts his ultimate, which is going to be pretty big. He also drains all enemies within range, including invisible units. And then Demon Flare, he doesn't have to suck enough HP in order to cast this ability. Instead, it's just 75% of the health he's drained in magic damage up to a cap. So this is going to do potentially huge amounts of damage if you can really wait till the end of a team fight to get the Demon Flare detonation. Hopefully all this makes Swain feel a little bit better to play as, and a little bit more active in lane especially, is why I'm excited about these changes. Moving on to Sylas, our favorite mid laner. He really took some nerfs on the last couple of patches. So Riot are trying to change the fallback power of his ultimate and make him feel a little bit better to play as, and give him more of a niche when you want to play Sylas. Accordingly, he now has the E shield on his first cast of Abscond back, but it's now a magic damage shield, not a damage shield. So this gives Sylas sort of a niche as an anti-mage, because it does give him the ability to say, yeah, I can sort of dodge this damage by getting that magic damage shield off. The cooldown also no longer scales with rank, so it is a much better 1-point wonder, but the stun duration did go down to sort of compensation. Chain Lash's damage also went up, so we got a little bit of that wave clear back, but the Petricite damage reduction also went down on Petricite Burst, so he will be feeling a little bit better about the wave clear, but his R did receive some pretty hefty nerfs here. The cast range went down, and he can't hold an ultimate for as long as he used to. Additionally, he's down to a 60-second cooldown on his ultimate from 15. Sylas will really never be getting multiple ultimates in a team fight anymore and just kind of carrying a team fight off of that power. Instead, he really needs to be picking the one ultimate that he wants to use that's going to turn the team fight and then employing that. So we'll have to see. I think that the ultimate changes are really huge. He got a little bit of power back in his basic abilities, but the ultimates are really why Sylas was strong and why he was picked. And I think this is still going to really kill off Sylas and make him not feel that great to play against. And moving on to Tahm Kench, right, are trying to make him feel significantly less frustrating to play against, especially in the top lane. I personally think these changes are killing Tahm Kench dead in the water, but we'll have to see how they end up shaking out. First and foremost, in Acquired Taste, abilities don't apply in Acquired Taste stacks. He does deal 2.5% of his maximum health as additional damage at any number of stacks, but he won't be applying them from a distance with his Q, so that's already a pretty big nerf. The Q also got a whole bunch of changes. It doesn't hit enemies in an arc in front of Tahm Kench on cast, so it should feel like you can actually juke it when he does get in close. And stunning an enemy with it consumes all stacks of an Acquired Taste, on top of the slow power going down. So that's already a pretty big change to the sort of power that Tahm Kench top had, and being able to sort of spam Q, get stacks on you, and then just walk up and eat you, and then when he spits you out, you still haven't lost all your stacks, he restacks on you, terrible things happen to you. W also got some changes. Enemies aren't stunned after they're regurgitated, and they're no longer nearsighted when devoured, so Tahm Kench really has not that much utility in devouring an enemy. It does have some flat damage based on the enemy's maximum health, so it's much better as a sort of one-point wonder, especially given that the monster damage has capped as well. He can devour Blue Sentinel and Red Brambleback now, so maybe Tahm Kench got a little bit stronger, but those are some pretty serious changes. It does mean that you're only gonna want to put 1 point into his W. And then Thick Skin did have some changes. He no longer gets to store 100% of the damage he takes as gray health. It's now 65% at maximum rank. And given that this is a last max most of the time, Tahm Kench is going to be significantly squishier. Now, he does heal 75% of gray health, so if he doesn't have to pop the shield, he's going to get a lot more health back. But because the shield is a lot worse than it used to be, it's going to be a lot easier to kill Tahm Kench. Now, he'll definitely feel less frustrating to play against, but it also just goes to show just how bad he's going to feel to play, and just how sort of binary his kit is, given the strength of Devour. So we'll see how this shakes out, but I do feel like top Kench is probably not a thing anymore. I say this crossing my fingers. Finally, for champions at least, we are onto Yuumi. Sorry guys, I know this has been a very long video, but talking about Yuumi here real quick. She is receiving some changes in order to reduce how much poke she can put out in lane, and how just annoying she can be to deal with. First of all, Bob and Block's shield is worse at early levels, though it is better at later levels, and she doesn't restore mana when she hits an enemy with an empowered basic attack. Her Q is also losing a decent chunk of damage, but it did go up in AP ratio, so if she's able to build AP, it'll feel a little bit better, and the mana cost increases significantly with rank, so now Yuumi will feel a lot worse if she's trying to max this first and really get the poke on in lane. As compensation, her heal is significantly better, the mana cost went down, and it can now heal up to 130% based on the target's missing health. So this should make Yuumi a lot more focused around healing, and less about just spamming Prowling Projectile until you have to leave the lane. So I think she'll still be very good. Her ultimate has not been touched at all, for example, but hopefully it'll make her less frustrating to play against, especially in lane. And these are a couple of ranged top laners. They are generally going to be less annoying in the top lane just by auto attack spam, because their ability to run away is significantly reduced, and they lost some of their base attack speed and base attack damage scalings, so hopefully they'll be a little bit easier to deal with. Finally, a couple of other quick thoughts I want to go on before I conclude the video. Death Recap has been updated. That's right, you won't die to 500 damage from the Infernal Dragon Static Shiv anymore. That's not going to be a thing anymore. Hopefully. We'll see. It is still testing, so go ahead and check it out and see how the new Death Recap works. And finally, the Show Allied chat is now a thing, and this is going to be toggled on for all new players. So if you're wondering why your team isn't talking to you, this is why. Basically, you can mute your teammates' chat permanently and your enemies' chat permanently. So like how you have to opt into all chat, you now have to opt into your team's chat. I think this is a terrible change. I think this is the worst change Riot have actually made, period, in a longest time playing this game. But that's for another video. I will be talking about that at the future. Those are all the biggest changes from 9.14. I know this was a big one. Thanks to you guys so much for hanging in with me the whole way through. Definitely take a look at the patch notes. I haven't covered everything. There are a lot of other changes going on in this patch. Like I said, this is a huge patch. So we'll see how everything shakes out. Hopefully it does make the game a lot more interesting to play and introduces a lot more champions to the meta. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I put a video like this every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, which is linked in the description. I upload articles just about each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.